Okay, hello everyone. We are in the session Intrinsic Motivation and Unschooling with Gina Riley. And I'm Janice. I'm going to be the support person for this session. And we really appreciate having so many different people here. We just ask that you respect yourself and the space and others. And then just a reminder to keep yourself on mute unless it's your turn to talk. And I'll hand it over to Gina. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Thanks, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. So we are going to talk about intrinsic motivation and unschooling today, and it's something that I have studied pretty much all my academic career. I'm so excited to share this with you. I love, awesome. I love all these intros in the chat, and I want to talk more too. So we're going to have time for a ton of Q&A, for a ton of discussion. I'm just going to do a short lecture, and then we're going to really talk about it. And at some points during the lecture, I'm going to bring you back. So I am clinical professor and program director of the Adolescent Special Education Program at CUNY Hunter College in New York. And this means I have my feet in two worlds. So in my everyday life, I am running a special education teacher education program. So I'm teaching teachers for most of the time. I'm going into schools and walking into schools for most of the time. So I have a foot there, as well as my research interest, which has been my research interest now for 26 years. And that is unschooling, homeschooling, and self-directed learning. So that research interest is really important to me. And my goal has always been really to navigate those two worlds and to learn from them. So I am not anti-school and I am not anti-anything. I am just pro-choice of everything and anything that works for kids and teens, really thinking about their choices and decisions. I am internationally known for my research on homeschooling, unschooling, and self-directed learning. I talk mostly about self-determination and intrinsic motivation and a sub-theory of self-determination theory, which is cognitive evaluation theory. I have two books, and if anyone, I think KP, your mic is on, so if you want to mute that, that's great. I have two books and a third that just came out. So I am the author of Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom, which is an academic book on unschooling. And then the Homeschooling Starter Guide, which is more of a starter guide for new homeschoolers. I just published with Carlo Ricci, The Joys of Self-Determined Learning, which contains amazing stories of world schooling and self-directed learning and those who are just doing things differently and leading the self-directed education movement. So happy to have that book out. Last year, I published a study on Hudson Valley Sudbury schoolers with Peter Gray and Kevin Curry Knight. And Peter Gray has been a wonderful collaborator throughout my academic life. And in press is a study on unschooling students with disabilities. So that is super exciting. It should be published within a couple of months in the Journal of Unschooling and Alternative Learning. So do look for that. It's a really neat study with some really great results. So when I think of unschooling, I am always thinking of it through the lens of intrinsic motivation, and specifically through the lens of two theorists, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan of the University of Rochester. So they created self-determination theory in 1985, and this theory has been long-lasting. It's been used in educational environments, it's been used in healthcare, it's been used within the workplace, and it really just defines intrinsic motivation. And I love the definition because it calls it an energy orientation. And it really focuses on aspects of curiosity and vitality and self-determination. And Dichi and Ryan also specifically state that intrinsic motivation, right, doing things that you love, doing things that you want to do because you want to do them, is the opposite of extrinsic motivation, which is a desire to do things for external reasons, whether it is external in terms of just a social reason, like everyone expects our kids to go to school, and so that becomes an extrinsic motivator, or, for the A or for the gold star or for the sticker or all the things that Alfie Kohn has done such landmark work on in terms of extrinsic motivation and the power of intrinsic motivation. So they put that within their definition, and I think that's so good. So again, when I talk about intrinsic motivation specifically, there are tons of definitions out there, but I am specifically using self-determination theory, Edward Dichi, Richard Ryan, University of Rochester. So my favorite quote comes from a Ryan and Dichi article in 2017. Right? And it talks about this prototype of active and willing acquisition and integration of knowledge. When our kids and our teens and us as adults come into a self-directed learning environment, it changes the game. Right? All of a sudden, there is no forced learning, there's no assessment, there's no test. There is just this active and willing acquisition of knowledge that happens really, really naturally. I have to say that, I've seen this in real life, right? It's not that I just study this. I'm also the mother of a grown unschooler, right? His first day of school was his first day of college. So I have seen this in real life, and I know how it works. And all of you who are doing this work in your own self-directed learning centers or with unschooling or within a homeschooling environment, you've seen it too, right? You know that kids can walk in and teens can walk into their day and shape their day and have this active and willing acquisition of knowledge. So this is my favorite quote. It's really important to me because it does focus on humans' natural propensity to learn. And from unschooling students with disability study, what I've learned is that is across boundaries, right? So all kids, all equal, like all kids, neurodiverse, kids with physical disabilities, kids with emotional disabilities, and kids that are non-disabled, right? This really just works across the spectrum. So in terms of insight, I've always been passionate about the fact that intrinsic motivation creates this different environment for learning. So instead of learning because they have to, kids learn because they want to. And we all know what this feels like, right? We all do this work. So we know that this feels like less pressure. We know this feels like less stress. We know this feels like an opening, right? An opening of heart and an opening of mind. So when I study self-determination theory, I'm not only studying the theory that defines intrinsic motivation, but I'm also studying something called cognitive evaluation theory. Fancy name, simple thing, right? So cognitive evaluation theory is a sub-theory of self-determination theory, and it really focuses on the environmental tenets that facilitate intrinsic motivation in kids and teens and adults. And you have to remember that intrinsic motivation can't be forced, right? You can't lead a kid to intrinsic motivation. You can't lead yourself. You can't be like, I'm going to be intrinsically motivated today, right? It doesn't work that way. You really have to create these environmental tenets so that you can facilitate but not force intrinsic motivation in the kids you work with, in the teens you work with, in your children, right? So you're just setting the stage. And when I do this with my teachers, this is called the magic of teaching. And when I do it with a group of unschoolers and self-directed learners, this is just the magic of life, right? The magic of life is held in three things. And the first thing is competence, right? Facilitating in others a sense of competence or confidence. And we're going to take these apart. The second thing is autonomy, right? Without autonomy, we can't have intrinsic motivation. And autonomy in this case is defined by freedom and choice. And then you have this relatedness aspect. This, in order to facilitate intrinsic motivation in others, they have to feel like someone has their back no matter what. And this relatedness sometimes comes from parents. It doesn't have to come from parents all the time. It can come from friends. It can come from a tutor. It can come from a facilitator. It can come from a teacher, right? People just need to know that someone has their back no matter what. And so when I look at this image and when I think about self-determination theory, which again defines intrinsic motivation, and then cognitive evaluation theory, which really sets the stage. This is such important stuff in the world of self-directed learning, especially if you are either in the business of creating a self-directed learning center, or if you are just unschooling in whatever way, as an adult, as a child, as a teen. So again, that's where those two definitions come from. So I'm going to pause now before we take apart competence, autonomy, and relatedness, because we're going to do that. But I just want to see if anyone has any questions regarding self-determination theory itself, the theory, or the definition. Okay, and if there's no questions, I'm going to go back and we're going to take it apart together. Okay, I like to take it nice and slow because it's such a good theory and it's so strong. So when we're talking about a sense of competence, we're talking about success feelings and overall positive feelings about activities. And these all foster intrinsic motivation, right? And we know that kids love feeling competent. When kids love feeling competent, you see the joy. When they finish that puzzle, when they finish that Rubik's Cube, when they understand, like, finally, how to get up on that skateboard and stay on, right? That's where they get to feel competence. And so I want to know when you feel most competent. And I also want to know if you've seen this example of competence in the kids that you work with. And so what that looks like, or what that looks like to you as an adult.
When I was teaching piano, I was very deliberate that instead of working on a page of music, if they felt confident just working with a couple of measures of music, like I preferred for them to be so confident in that little bit that they did. And then it was amazing because they even though for me, like, a measure was just so simple or so whatever, but like if they felt like they conquered it and were so like happy about it, having accomplished it, it was so easy for them to just push their boundary a little bit more. And it was intrinsic, like it was just hands off. It was amazing. I love it.
I love that. My son's a classical guitarist, so I get that, right? Like all of a sudden, like he started learning to improvise, and like the world opened up, and it was such a little thing to his teacher and such a huge thing to him. Love it, love it, love it. What else?
I have one. Sorry, my internet's not great, so I'm leaving my camera off. The self-directed learning center that I volunteer at, and I also was doing my research at, one of the things I thought was really cool was that they have kind of a verbal norm of kind of assigning the kids labels based on what they do. So it's not so-and-so plays the guitar, it's so-and-so is a skilled guitarist. It's so-and-so is an artist, rather than, oh, they picked up painting a few weeks ago. But the thing that I thought that's the coolest is when you say that to the teens, they fully accept the titles and the accomplishments, that they don't argue with you. And like, having worked with teens in all kinds of school settings, I'm used to being like, oh, so you're really good at this. And they're like, oh, well. And in all my interviews, I'd be like, you're really good at like being kind of the social organizer in the space. And they'd be like, oh yeah, I started doing that, da, 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 da. But just their easy acceptance of like, yeah, I do that. And I am good at that was so cool.
I love that, right? Because how we define ourselves is really, really important. There's a difference between like being good at writing and then being a writer, right? Can you feel that? You're a writer, you're a musician, you're an artist. And that there's like such bravery there, right? There's bravery and competence. I love that. I love that, Tanya. What else?
I'm thinking about the difference in ways children react to their own competence and confidence if they are in a trusting relationship with the adult or not yet in a trusting relationship. So I know when I see children who feel that joy you're talking about, you can hear it in their voice, you can see it in their face, you can see it in their body, in whatever ways they express joy, you can see it. It's so obvious when they really love something they did, they feel that success. And then with children that I'm just getting to know or are new to the community and we don't have that trust base yet, their joy and celebration is quieter and smaller. So I'm just thinking about that right now.
I love that. It's so funny. I've been thinking about that all through the week, right? And we take this apart in this lecture. So we take apart competence and we take apart autonomy and we take apart relatedness. But it's a triad, right? Like it's all three of them together that creates the magic. So it's really hard to feel competent if you don't have like that deep sense of relatedness and acceptance. And that's why these three together are so important. I'm so glad you said it because it's something I've been thinking about like all week. Yeah.
Would it be okay to add? Oh, go ahead, Rivka. I'm so sorry. We were talking.
Okay. Oh, that's okay. Thank you. So I've spent a huge chunk of my professional life in early childhood play-based education. And I think because that really lends itself much easier than, traditional schooling to these concepts of intrinsic motivation. And you see it so clearly in just about every moment. When you're working, let's say, with 2-year-olds and they've climbed a little bit higher than they did the day before, or they've figured out how to, even navigate the space when they're pushing a wagon, or, but it's just there in every aspect of their play where they're challenging themselves just a little bit more and a little bit more, and they're so excited and lit up by it, and it's so exciting to watch.
I love that, right? Early childhood, intrinsic motivation is like, woo, right? Like in early childhood, it's just so easy, right? Intrinsic motivation is so easy when you're 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then when you're looking at like traditional school charts, right? It like goes up, 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 up. And then about second grade, it goes down, 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 down. And then it like peaks a little bit in high school, but like it's definitely like this, right? Like early childhood, you're just going up and up and up when it comes to intrinsic motivation because you're doing so much and you're learning so much. And it's so exciting and everyone around you is excited. And I think one of my goals, like for my life, is to have people feel that way the whole time. So instead of seeing that like it goes up, 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 up in early childhood and then it just like seeps down after second grade, right? That we just want to go up, 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 right? And knowing that there's going to be ebbs and flows in that. Yeah. Sarah.
Oh, I was just going to echo just sort of the mind expansion that I'm having about the necessity of the relatedness, and then in addition, what you just said about the intrinsic motivation sort of peaking out at about second grade. We notice that we have a lot of families interested in our community up to about that age, and that's when it starts to feel very uncomfortable for families to make the leap. And that's exactly when we want to keep the kids, young people, on that trajectory of maintaining their autonomy and sense of competence and hopefully relatedness. And the other side of that is that when we have kids come to us who've been in conventional school, the relatedness piece seems to be the piece that has suffered the most. And understandably, they seem to need more time, as Emily was sharing, to really trust us. Why should they? You know, we're just like the other adults who've treated them poorly, most likely, and not respected their autonomy or witnessed their competence or any of those things. So building that relationship is so key. And the different degrees of time it seems to take different young people to feel safe, depending on what their experience has been and how deep their wounds go, is really interesting to me. So I just want to hear everything you have to say about, you know, what that looks like in different young people.
Yeah, I'm so glad like you're all part of the conversation too, right? Because we all have like our unique experiences, and it's really important to share them because you might meet teens that are different from the teens I meet, right? But yeah, they work. I mean, this triad is a triad and it works together. Love it, love it. Such good comments. Awesome. Thank you. All right, so we're going to go to talk a little bit, right? Like when you're talking about competence, we talked about strengths, we talked about exploration of talents and interests. Those are all really important. And you know what it feels like, right? You see the joy. Vanessa knows what it feels like, right? When they get that, like they get that small part, you see it, it's tangible. So this is really important. For older teens, sometimes it's not as tangible, right? Especially if they've had prior schooling experiences or prior experiences where their talents and strengths haven't been supported. And so this is where it's important for us to identify talents and strengths in older kids and to really like I love, I'm thinking of Tanya's, like, you're a writer, right? You're a pianist, like you are a musician, and just to really extend that competence by identifying it, because sometimes you don't even know you're a writer until someone tells you, and that's really important. And I am not against like positive specific praise, right? I'm not a big praise for nothing person. I'm not a big great job person. But if someone has written a beautiful piece or created a beautiful piece of artwork, I am all for like sharing with them that. And that automatically does raise competence and confidence levels. So thinking about confidence and competence. Then there's autonomy. And I'm so glad I'm in a group. Usually when I review this with teachers, this is the scary part, right? Giving choice and freedom to individuals, to kids, to teens is the scary part. And I love that in this group, it might still be scary, but it's also just honored. So Dichi and Ryan will say that in order for intrinsic motivation to flourish, the sense of competence must also be accompanied by a sense of autonomy. And so this is choice, this is acknowledgement of feelings, this is opportunity for self-direction, right? And that's when we really see feelings of intrinsic motivation and intrinsic satisfaction enhanced. And I'm always the one to say that like a lot of autonomy from our studies is just time to pursue one's interest, right? And not like, here's a 45-minute block and we're going to study this, but instead like, you've got the day, right? What are you going to do with that day? I love the best ever Saturday, right? Someone within the unschooling movement called unschooling the best ever Saturday, because there was like unlimited time to do whatever you want and to create your own schedule and to feel that freedom and independence. So autonomy is really, really important here. And I want to talk about it. And then I want to talk about something that comes up with autonomy all the time, actually, two things. So tell me what you're seeing when you are seeing autonomy, or when you have felt autonomy, or when your kids have felt autonomy. What does that feel like? What does that look like?
I'm kind of thinking of two things. One, when you said the best ever Saturday, I really thought of this little like a children's book called Yes Day. And it's basically where a kid gets to do whatever he wants, like within the parents' kind of safety and guidelines and whatnot. And yeah, I do feel like that is a lot of autonomy about like how your day goes. And another thing that I'm thinking of is how when kids start like transition into autonomy, and I'm thinking from like a school to like kind of a unschooling type environment, it's interesting seeing them start to take the reins and grow confident in the autonomy that they have, and like, really, are you going to allow me to do this? And then starting, yeah, the confidence that builds through that process is really magical.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. I'm thinking, right, like when you're talking about a period of deschooling, right? So a period where a kid goes from like a school environment to a more self-directed environment, there is this like very big, first of all, competence, right? They kind of slowly get competent about it. And then all of a sudden they're like, I have this choice, like I have it, and it becomes a realization and it feels different, right? It feels like you can do anything. And that's hugely powerful. So thinking of that, great. And I love like equal worth, a sense of adventure. Love this. Yes, like the ability to take risks or the willingness to take risks in advance. Yeah, or to advance. Yes. When my son is driven to do the work that's important to him. Yes. Yes. Keep going. What does autonomy feel like? Yeah, Katie.
Hey, same. I'm having internet issues, so I'm going to leave my camera off. In typical ALC fashion, we have our offerings, little like workshops, classes, projects that anyone can throw together, and just being able to opt in or out of those, having that autonomy, it kind of gives the young people that might kind of scare away from like one of our common questions is, well, how long will this one be? And it's like, I want to also have time to plan my play, which I'm also learning and connecting through. But then whenever it's like, oh, okay, so 45 minutes, that's a set amount of time. Like maybe I will jump into making this paper mache jellyfish where I'm going to get a lot of like art and hands-on crafting experience. And it's neat to see once they have the choice to do something or not, what comes out of that.
I love that. Choice is huge, right? Choice is really, really big. I'm looking at all the great comments.
Yeah, I just had a comment. This is Dave here.
Hi.
So one of the things that we actually kind of struggle with is with autonomy is just not choosing anything. So sometimes our kids just maybe not so much a problem with not choosing anything as much as wanting to choose screens and just sort of the term I come up with is becoming screen zombies. And so there's this real tendency to just want to, grab the iPad, play some games or pop the TV on. And so, yeah, when I saw the session, I saw the word motivation, I kind of glommed onto that because sometimes I just don't see that. And I'm just kind of curious what, how people handle that, I guess.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this, but I want others to share. What are we thinking when we like freedom of choice means freedom of choice, right? And that means that we are giving, in most cases, free choice. And choice is tricky, right? Because there's like what I call perceived autonomy, and then there's true autonomy. And so true autonomy would be allowing free choice. And then perceived autonomy would be like if you're out to dinner with someone and you have a menu of things and they're like, choose whatever you want, and you're like sitting there and you're like, really, can I choose whatever I want? And just as that you're getting excited, someone says, but the steak here is really, really good, so you should choose that, right? Or but the steak here is awesome, and it kind of taints things a little bit. So there's a difference between true autonomy and perceived autonomy. And I think as parents and individuals involved in self-direction, we kind of have to choose which one we're giving, right? Are we giving true choice or are we giving limited choice? And it's fine to give limited choice. Like, I am not saying it's not fine, right? If it's like autonomy, except for screens, is the type of autonomy you're giving, no judgment there. I get it. Screens are a huge topic and it's really, really hard to manage. But you've also got to be honest with yourself that that's the choice you're giving, and to be honest with the people you're working with that that's the choice you're giving. So I think that, again, any type, like with my teachers, they don't have a lot of autonomy in their schools. So we have this conversation of like, what can you do? Right. And it's always like, I mean, can you have them use a pen for math? And for teachers, it's like I can, right? Can you have them do math with a marker? Would you care? And that to them is a big choice. And that's totally fine. Right. So it's like where you're at on this spectrum of autonomy. And it's hard, and you've got to respect your own boundaries and your own feelings about it. And you've got to respect the other person's boundaries and feelings about that too. It's a big, big topic. I love that you brought it up, Dave. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to popcorn to Allison.
Thanks. Yeah, I can say a couple of things kind of to that piece. Just one, yesterday, one of the sessions kind of focused on like learning and what is learning, visible learning and invisible learning. And so doing nothing, when I'm doing nothing, I'm really like synthesizing a lot of information in my head and, or creating ideas. And so doing nothing, honestly, is a lot of times very productive in terms of what we gauge as learning. But also a lot of those screens have similar, if you want to look at like learning measures, a lot of, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, like happens during games. And the last thing also at our ALC, we do, that came up as a concern for the culture, that people were getting sucked into games and they were like, my friends won't play tag with me because they're, they have too many screens. So as a community, we're coming together and we're saying, okay, like what's the need here? And looking at possible solutions, and we'll see if everyone agrees to move forward with these solutions, and we'll try them out. Like maybe you try to think about taking a break when you're gaming and walk around and see what's up on the board, and just trying like little things like that to help as a community. And this is a kid, or a young person led solution. So hopefully it will help with some of those kind of feelings that there's like a lack of connection happening because of the screens.
Thanks, Allison. You said so many important things there. Someone else comment, and then I have a follow-up. Yeah, Rivka.
So I am naturally inclined to be cautious about too much screen time because it is addictive. But on the other hand, I just want to talk personal experience. I was very concerned for a while. My son got really into gaming during COVID, and really took over. It was a lot of time spent. And eventually he's, at 14, he just kind of decided he doesn't have time for that anymore. And he started taking, business and marketing classes online because that's what he wanted to do. And, it's funny for me now to remember a few years ago how concerned I was that he didn't really have a passion, nothing, except for, games and whatever. And now he is so self-motivated and so driven. And I just want to put that out there.
Can I ask the group, right? Like as adults, and hopefully there's some kids and teens on here too. When do you use your screens most? When do you use your screens most? I'm just going to type in chat when I do, and you guys can type in chat too. Keep going. When do you use your screens most? Knowing that you can be tired for years. We had when I was unschooling my son, Nintendo Wii was really big, and we had the year of Wii Golf and the year of Wii Bowling. Okay, so I'm looking at, and this is like a good exercise for your kids and teens too, right? To ask them, when do you use your screens, right? And to just notice. I tend to use it when I'm tired or when I'm stressed or when I'm stuck on something or when I'm trying to distract. Yeah, Joy said when I'm trying to distract or to break from what's going on around me, or when I feel the need to tune out or to tune in, or for work, or when I'm cleaning and I want to relax or distract, or when I'm bored and I'm looking for information, right? So there's all different reasons why we use screens. And some of them are highly productive, and some of them are just when we want to relax. And it's really the same for our kids, right? There are reasons why our kids use screens. And I think all I ever ask kids is to just identify the reasons, knowing that all the reasons are okay, right? It's okay to want to rest and to need to rest. It's okay to want to distract or to tune out. It's okay to be bored. Like, it's completely okay to be bored, because like a period of boredom is like that period of like stewing. And then all of a sudden, like that's when like the breakthroughs happen, right? So all of these things are okay. And just having kids and teens just identify, and ourselves, right? Don't like leave adults out of this. As adults, we need to identify when we're using screens and why. And then whatever you do with that information, you do with it. But, you know, part of choice is making a decision. And so when we make a decision, we have to gather information. And in gathering information is where we get to like the heart of this screen conversation. Right. So just thinking about that. And again, no judgment, whether you're a no screens person or a screens all day person, or whether you're a kid or teen who likes to like be on like Roblox all day. I don't care. Right. That's amazing. I just want to know why. Right. And like a real authentic why. And so just thinking about that when we have a conversation about screens. Okay. Anything else on freedom and autonomy? All right. So I just want to add one thing. A lot of times, oh, sorry.
Somebody, Emily, you wanted to say
Emily.
something?
I did unmute real quick. I just wanted to add that I'm thinking a lot about, in working with children, autonomy looks like the adults asking the questions and the kids making the decisions. And you said that word decision just a moment ago. So I wanted to just highlight that.
I love that, Emily. Thank you. I'm really big on decision making these days. I'm creating a curriculum for decision making, which is so not an unschooly thing to do, but it's for New York State. And so it's kind of a cool project, but it also gets to the heart of freedom and autonomy. Any other things about autonomy, choice, and decisions? Yeah, Sarah.
Sorry, I was lagging with the digital hand raising. I'm just thinking a lot about, again, the transition of kids from perhaps a schooled environment, or even very young people who come to us, and the sort of like settling into to having autonomy takes so much time. And I think about the framing that happens in spaces where adults are sharing space with young people. Of course, like we say a lot that like we're giving them choice, or the adults are allowing them XYZ. And that kind of language even shapes the way we approach giving them autonomy. It still upholds this idea of the hierarchy, that it's us we might be creating the space, but also I think it upholds the idea that it's still us that's allowing them to do X, Y, or Z. And so we think a lot about how we can disrupt that in the ways it happens in our community. And one of the things we notice is that kids new will come to us often and say, hey, can I do XYZ? The sentence starts with can I? And we interrupt it right there, kindly, lovingly, of course. And we say, wow, it really sounds like there's something you want to do. Sounds like you really want to use the glue gun. What considerations have you taken for how you might use the glue gun safely? How doing so will take care of the community? What thoughtful intention have you brought to that decision? So this is circling back to, making these decisions because you don't actually have to ask us. Your time is yours and this space is yours. And also when you're making that decision, what thoughtful intention have you applied to your decision? And usually they're like, oh God, nobody has ever asked me that. I'll come back in a second, and then they come back and say, okay, well, I realize that we're going to be doing set the week in 10 minutes. So right now is not a good time for glue gun. But after that, I'm going to get out the safety equipment and make sure it's all set up. And I'm going to check in with the person next to me, make sure it's cool. I'm using the glue gun next to them, and so I don't research autonomy. So I don't know if that's a practice that can facilitate it becoming internalized, but that's something we do here because we notice it's very hard for kids new to being in a relationship with adults like this to break the habit of asking, can I? And we want them to.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I love, the thinking about the power structure and how like a true facilitation is equal, right? But then once it becomes can I, then that power structure shifts. Yeah, really important. Really, really important. And we should be talking more about like decision making and having kids and teens make we always talk about how you should make your own decisions, but I think a lot of times that's very perceived. And I really want to have that conversation about authentic decision making within the space of autonomy and choice. And I think there's a session on that, Janice, right? Someone's having a session on decision making. So cool. Yeah. Okay, the one other thing that I want to just bring up that comes into this conversation a lot is something that I call dignity of risk, right? So when you're talking about usually preteens to older teens and autonomous decisions, right? You get into this whole like, I don't want my kid to make decisions that might affect their health and safety. Right? There is a concept. It's a concept that actually comes from supported decision-making for students with disabilities, but I think it applies here as well. There's a concept called the dignity of risk, right? And I always introduce dignity of risk by asking people who on this Zoom has never made a poor decision in their life. I love that. I love that I have silence. Okay. Who has ever made a poor decision in their life? Like ever. Okay. So we're all equal there, right? Like we've all made poor decisions. And there needs to be an allowance for kids to make poor decisions too, or just to make decisions that might not turn out well. Right? And that's just part of life. That's not a mistake. That's not right. That's just part of life. And so thinking about this concept of dignity of risk and how that just might be the biggest gift we can give kids and teens. They try something, it doesn't work out. Right? It's also a very heated topic, so we can have a whole conversation on dignity of risk, but just playing with that term in your head, I think right now is helpful. And so just playing with that term.
Where does that term come from, or what school of thought?
Yeah, so it's often used in the field of disability studies because when we talk about decision making for students with disabilities, we often talk about like parents being very like, I just don't want them to get hurt, or I just want them to be safe, or I just don't want them to make that decision without my help. Right? It actually comes from like guardianship, where individuals are coming in and having guardianship over teens with disabilities or young adults with disabilities. And so in a lot of court cases and a lot of in the field of disability studies, we often talk about dignity of risk and how everyone, will make a mistake and will make a poor decision. And that's just the dignity of living. Yeah, Daniel.
I love this topic because this is something that I'm constantly finding that I, need to kind of like de-school on, this idea of like allowing like risk-taking behavior and whatnot. And as much as I de-school on it, I'm like, oh wait, I'm still holding back in this area. And it really makes me think back to yesterday's panel session with Alexander was talking about risks versus hazards. And I think as a society, adults will really generalize almost everything as like stereotypically generalize everything as a hazard versus a risk. And that's why we overprotect. Just something that popped up.
Yeah, I'm going to watch that session now because that's important. Right. And I'm not a risk-taking, like I happen not to be a risk-taking person. My family is not a bunch of risk takers, but I've talked about it like with my own teenager and young adult, right? And like that whole dignity of risk, I love the hazard, right? Because I used to say you can do anything as long as it doesn't affect your health or safety, right? And maybe letting that even go a little bit. People make choices and we got to learn to make them early, and we got to talk more about decision making and risk and hazard. I love that, Daniel. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay. Let's go to the next because I'm looking at the time now. This is a quote from Peter and I's study about unschooling, but this goes into like autonomy, right? And the autonomy that unschooling provides versus sort of a more school or structured environment. So I think that quote is always important. There's also one more term within autonomy that I wanted to talk about, which is autonomy support, right? Autonomy support is an amazing, amazing term for individuals within self-directed learning centers, right? Because what you're providing as a facilitator of a self-directed learning center or as a facilitator of an unschooling environment is autonomy support. You are facilitating choice. You are facilitating opportunities for self-direction. You are valuing one's personal freedom. You are offering meaningful choices, and you're using non-controlling language and actions consistently, right? So when I talk about facilitation, I talk about autonomy support is really what the facilitator's role is. And it's so great. I just want to stop the share so I can get into chat too. I love, love, love this. Love that, Alicia. I'm going to keep that with me. Someone save the chat so I can keep that with me. But when I think about autonomy support, right, I never thought of the importance of this. And then I went to Summerhill this summer to talk at their festival. And one of the teachers said, forget it, I'm not calling myself a facilitator anymore. I'm calling myself like the person who provides autonomy support, because that's really what I do. That like defines everything I do. And so autonomy support becomes like a really important term in this conversation.
That's such a game changer, because I've struggled to communicate how a lot of the teachers in our program, they're not here to teach and try to fill up adults. They're more about just creating space, right, for the intrinsic knowledge to come through, right? That's a game changer. I really like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly, Allison, like what, right? Like even facilitation seems a little bit more facilitative than autonomy support. Love that. Yeah. Ooh, I'm watching for your dissertation. I'm so excited. Super excited about that one. Send it to me. Oh, love it. Love it. Yeah. So just thinking about, again, I like giving like us all as a community things to think about, whether it's dignity of risk and autonomy support. Like we can't, solve all the problems or have this full conversation, but we can also just like talk about terminology and think about terminology and how it might change in the environments that we work in. Okay. So now we're getting to my favorite one. Again, like none of this works without it. And it's the concept of relatedness. So to facilitate intrinsic motivation, right, one needs competence, one needs to facilitate a sense of autonomy. And the last thing is one needs to facilitate a sense of relatedness. And relatedness is lifespan, right? And it just means that someone has your back no matter what. So if you ever studied psychology and you know about humanism, right? It's very much like sort of this Carl Rogers unconditional love, except it's unconditional acceptance, right? So it's, I accept you no matter what, no matter the decision you make, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, I unconditionally accept you no matter what. This is based on interpersonal affiliation. It's based on authentic care. It's based on sharing of enriching experiences, right? And I love the concept of relatedness because this concept of unconditional acceptance, right? It's so easy. It's like unconditional love. You hear it and you're like, oh, that's so easy. And then you practice it and you're like, I am not like even coming near this, right? And so it's sort of the same thing. It means non-judgment. It means whatever you choose, I'm here. And that's hard. Right? So I'm going to come back. We're going to stop the share for a second. I want to come back and I want to hear your experiences with what this might look like in your environments. It's hard. Easy to say, hard to do. And if you can identify what it looks like, what it feels like, what does relatedness feel to you, like to the kids that go to your schools or your centers or in your family? What does that feel like?
I have something to say here. So I do like some coaching, and one thing that I always come back to is that connection is key. And I feel like relatedness is a lot more defined than connection. And I love this idea that it's like connection, but it's also with that unconditional acceptance. And it's definitely something I'm still working through because I'm guessing a lot of us too in this generation, maybe often like first generation SDE type people, that we didn't grow up in an environment with unconditional acceptance. So then we're like, we didn't have a model, so we're creating it ourselves, and then we're changing it, breaking the cycle ourselves too. But yeah, definitely something I still struggle with when I'm like feeling that judgment coming in when my son is making a decision that I want to hold back, but I don't always. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that it gets harder as kids age too and start making like really independent decisions. Yeah. Katie. Did we lose her? Oh no. Okay.
Sorry, there we go. Lack of punishment that kind of goes along with that, like psychological and physical safety. You're not going to be isolated or called out whenever you do something that's not within our community agreements. We're all going to work together to identify needs and move forward in a way that's healthier and better for all of us that are in community together.
Yeah, that's true relatedness. That is true relatedness. I love that mutuality, reciprocity. Yes. Yeah, a sense of safety. And that's really what it is, right? It's like this deep sense of safety. No matter what, I accept you. Right. And I don't think we talk about love enough in education. So I'm going to add, like, no matter what, I love you. But whatever makes the wording is best for you, you take with you. Right. But competence, choice, it can't happen without at least one person having your back, no matter what. Yeah, it's just like, I love that you said it. It's just like Roger's unconditional positive regard, but I think it's like one step deeper. Yeah, pulling from your psych days. Yeah, it's just like that and one step deeper. So thinking about how all three really come together to provide this like incredible, amazing environment where intrinsic motivation is truly facilitated, right? It's never forced. It's always just facilitated. And this is how we provide these beautiful self-directed learning environments. This is the magic of all of this. I've always thought so. I've thought so since I first heard this theory, like 26 years ago, 27 now, 27 years ago, right? I immediately, I was like, this is unschooling. This is self-directed learning. This is homeschooling. It pulls everything together for me. And I hope it does you as well. So one more comment about relatedness and the link to cultural transmission, right? So we know that cultural transmission is the sharing of knowledge from one generation to another. And when we are transmitting knowledge, whether in our school culture or our center culture or our familial culture, right? That sort of cultural transmission, all of that becomes this like big, huge part of relatedness. It's born of attachment. It's intrinsically motivated. It's imparted through various forms of intelligence. And so just thinking about the link between relatedness and cultural transmission. And there's been a lot of like cultural transmission work that has been done within homeschooling and within literature on learning to read and learning math, things like that. So that becomes really important. And there's a deep link between relatedness and cultural transmission. And so I love this Neil quote, right? It's like, it's always been the life I've wanted to live. And I'm sure that all of you on this Zoom are thinking the same, right? Like, it's self-directed learning and intrinsic motivation is a really beautiful way to live in a positive and healthy way. I think all of our goals is to have our students and our kids and our teens work joyfully and live positively. And this is really, really, to create intrinsic motivation as the center of that life is a really good way to do it. So that's all I've got. Oh, I'm going to put my my information in the chat, and then we can do a Q&A. So I don't usually do Twitter, but I am Professor G. Riley on Twitter, and I am the Unschooled Professor on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook. And then if you want to email me, I'm going to give you my email. Janice, you're going to tell me if slides will be available to view. Otherwise, I can email people slides.
We have a resource folder if you want to put them in there, or just send them to me and I'll put them in there.
Perfect. 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 Yeah. So I'm going to open for Q&A. And then, yeah, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what questions you have. Tell me what you want to share.
I think I'm noticing a deep sensitivity to that last slide. There's like I didn't expect for the talk to go that direction. So I love that you wrapped it up with that, because I think that's the bridge of being culturally sensitive as well. Because just intrinsic to relatedness is also appreciation, like appreciating the cultural differences people come to. And it's also sparking just a lot of indigenous knowledge, really speaks so much to that relatedness. It's just a way of life and being. And I'm realizing with education, I think that component can be drawn out a little bit more. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, love, love, love. I mean, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I was thinking with that slide. And that's exactly what I feel, right? Like, because I live this, right? I don't only speak about it, like I live it. I got the joy of raising my son in this way. And so like, I'm living what I'm speaking here. Daniel.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines. Thinking about cultural transmission being connected to relatedness, it made me think of, and I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or not, but how colonization almost seems like the opposite of that. But then it makes me think like that kind of a colonized mindset also gets culturally transmitted. So I'm wondering if like where that fits in, and if you've thought about that at all.
Yeah, it's the reason I put it in my last, I've thought about it a lot. I do a lot of work on culture and equity. And one of the reasons it's in my last slide is because it's stuff that I'm still like working out and thinking about. Because yeah, like colonization can go two ways, right? And so it's something I'm working out in my head. I don't have any, I'll probably write about it. I'm pretty close to writing about it, but for me, it's something that I think about all the time. The relationship between relatedness and cultural transmission and cultural sensitivity and decolonization work and all of that. So I'll write about it soon. I don't have any firm thoughts yet. Yeah. Connection before correction. I love that. Yeah. And I like that, like, I'm thinking of Daniel's, right? Like there's connection, and then like relatedness is one step deeper. Relatedness really does have like, it's very, very deep in terms of like deep acceptance. Like if you've ever felt unconditionally accepted, and I hope you have in your life, that's what relatedness feels like. It feels like no matter what choice I make, someone is going to be okay with me. That like heals the world, right? Like no matter what choice I make, someone's going to be okay with me. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah, no, agreed. Agreed, Alicia. Agreed. And if there are none, I mean, feel free to enjoy all the other aspects of this weekend. There's a networking session. There's all these beautiful things going on. And feel free to continue the conversation. I always love talking via email or via social media, or I want to hear what you're thinking. So feel free to continue the conversation. And thank you for being such a joy. It's been such a joy to be here on a Saturday morning. So thank you. And thanks for inviting me.